Yeah.
Okay. All right, guys. Thank you for joining us. It's always a pleasure to host these webinars and hope value from this morning's session. Just by way of, I think Icon's really passionate about obviously creating financial freedom for people. And there's two major phases in this financial freedom journey. The first is the accumulation of assets. And Icon's really kind of dialed into the whole way that risk planning is done, because we believe that special or planning where it's need matched and income-based solution, the capacity to create, I suppose, disposable income in the accumulation of capital. And I think that's obviously of a client's wealth journey and the way he kind of creates financial freedom. The second part of that is the way that post-retirement planning is done. So this is client, he builds his wealth, he saves like a Trojan, he gets to a space where he's got enough capital to officially retire, I suppose, which is never enough, but he has what he's got. And then he for his post-retirement years. And now we enter the decumulation phase. So now he's drawing income off this capital that he's kind of built up over his whole life. And these are two components that we need to kind of manage as financial planners to ensure we can optimize the client's capital or income to start with. And then once he's built the capital through or savings, how do we actually make sure that the capital can last? So these are two real important components of any client's journey, any human's journey, really. So within Icon, as I said, the rebalancing of a client's risk portfolio to ensure that he has enough disposable income to accumulate is what we really focus on, and try and get that to a space where that becomes a reality in the client's life. And then the decumulation, I think it's a very misunderstood space, this decumulation, and how that impacts upon the client capital. So to me, has moved quite dramatically around the thinking, going from just a simple living annuity solution, almost entirely, and we've gone full circle. We're going back to how do we incorporate life annuities into this living annuity solution? And it's a massive market. It must be one of the most frightening places to be as a customer when you're stuck, you can't earn income, you are in retirement, and now your capital is running out and your income's going backwards. I think, with all the corruption in our country, with the political situation where we are, load shedding, all this, we've been through years of it. It has a big impact on the stock markets and on people's returns, and we're seeing it. The conversation I'm having in the market with advisors and with clients, there's a real kind of crisis emerging here. I think it's not too late to address it. It's certainly, I think it's an obligation. I think if we don't really look at it with open eyes, I think border on negligence. These people are vulnerable as retirees, and I think Just brings a really important component, a solution to the market, which talks to the customers. It's a really a valued kind of income security, capital security model. For you as the advisors, there is revenue in it and sustainable book structures and practices. So it's a big win for you as well. So I think all around, all stakeholders can benefit from a structure that this type of model brings to the market. I'll introduce Bjorn. Bjorn is the head of distribution at Just. He's in trade. He's worked internationally. He's done pricing and written a white paper on this whole decumulation and how it impacts, and the real way for us to understand this decumulation of clients' capital. Very often we can understand the compounding interest and Einstein's over the world and how accumulation of capital works, and we kind of all really understand that very well. But the behavior of money, the decumulation, is something that I think we all need to start to deepen our thinking around and understanding. Without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Bjorn, and we're looking forward to your insights here.
Well, thanks, Richard, and thanks for the intro. It all went well until you mentioned I'm an actuary, but we'll forgive you for that. No worries. And to the audience just listening to us today, we're quite passionate about this topic, and I today have the privilege of being able to combine two topics that I'm passionate about, and that's rugby and retirement or retirement income. and always to work with Icon. We found that when we started kicking off, we naturally had a good dovetail in our approaches. Richard spoke about freeing up income to allow you to for retirement, and then where we come in is retirement to help you to make the right decision, but more importantly, give the correct solutions for those decisions that you and your clients make. So without further ado, I'm Bjorn. Thanks for listening today. And today we're talking about the white paper. There'll be a link at the end. Please go and read it. I'll touch on quite a few of the things today, but the white paper is a cohesive outlay of how we think about it. And especially today, because we're going to have a bit of fun, you may actually want to read the paper in a more serious light. Okay, so what is the state of the retired nation? Why the crisis? And what are possible solutions and strategies? Okay, so let's hit straight into it. Okay, so an industry in crisis. I'll give you a few stats and numbers today. I'll keep it fairly light, but let's start with this one. Wait, what? 57-0? Okay, and that's if you didn't get, that's the score the Springboks had against the All Blacks in 2017. And just imagine how far we have come from that over the last, what is that now, 6 years. It is just amazing. And in a way, that's a great analogy or metaphor for where the insurance, or specifically the retirement industry, is at. There's hope, and we're going to talk about that today. But first, let's recap, just for those of you who don't know, but I'm sure you do, a rugby field and the positions. And as you know, it goes all the way from number 1 to number 15. Props, hookers, locks, flankers, 8th man, and then the back line. We'll talk about just some setting the scene before we continue. Okay, but then delving straight into retirement income zones. Now, what is that and how do we determine that? So to do that, we first need to understand rules like when is a client drawing down too much? And to answer this, we work with the CISO standard on living annuities. It came out in 2010 already, if memory serves me correctly, so it's been around for 13 years. And the table, which by law essentially must be included with every living annuity quotation or proposal done. Now, you may have many times, I must even as an actuary, given that Richard find it difficult to relate to this table, because yes, it gives interesting numbers, but what does it tell me? Today, we're going to help you to know what it tells you or how to read it. But let's firstly just talk about what it is. Firstly, in terms of the rows, just that different drawdown levels. And then for the columns, different return levels. How many years is your income expected to last until it starts reducing? Now, there's some assumptions behind this. The main one is that they assume a long-term inflation of 6% per annum. We feel that's a good long-term assumption around inflation. And then they did basic projections. We have mimicked those, and in fact, we extended on this table. I'll show you later. And they then project forward and see at which point, by trying to increase income with inflation as well, at which point does it effectively reach the cap? So as you know, drawdowns must be between 2.5% and 17.5%. Hence also those rows there, 2.5 to 17.5%. And starting with, let's say, 1 million, they project it forward and check at which point in time, so how many years until the income hits cap and then it starts to reduce. You could argue there's still a few years after that where there's still money left, but the bottom line is because taking out this product to give you retirement income, when does it start failing? And that's exactly what it says there. And of course, just going back to it, higher number of years in the top right-hand corner, and that is just because at lower drawdowns and at higher return assumptions, you get a longer period of income sustainability. So it's really the top right-hand corner where you want to be. However, for discussions today, we focused on that 10% column. And why is that a good one to look at? So those are nominal returns after fees. So that essentially means at a 6% inflation, that 10% column means a 4% real return, so 6 plus 4%, which we also feel is a good, safe, central assumption to work with. And therefore, we'll see those numbers 50, 33, 13, etc. in the next few slides. Okay, so zooming in on this of the table and doing it visually. So you'll see now bars, and I've just flipped it over, put the low drawdown rates at the bottom and the high drawdown rates at the top. Already two things to highlight here, and we've indicated that with the green and the red arrows. So at green, so at a 5% drawdown, at 10% nominal returns, your income should last for 33 years. Okay, that's that length of the bar here, and that's why it shows 33 years. According to the table, at 7.5% drawdown, so at the red arrow here, it will last for 13 years. Okay, so now already between 5 and 7.5% feels like a very small difference. And it is probably. I mean, if you think about it, it's 5% and 7.5% much of a muchness. However, as you can see, the impact is massive. Also, it's not really a 2.5% difference only. Let me give you an example to illustrate that. Let's say you have £1 million of capital at retirement. If you draw down 5%, that means you're drawing down 50,000 rand. Drawing down 7.5%, that means you're drawing down 75,000 per annum. And 50 versus 75,000 is not a difference. In fact, that's a 50% difference. And that's why the impact on your income sustainability is so massive. Now expanding this table, I said I'll expand it. So this is really exactly the same calculations. We were able to mimic it and really just get smaller steps. And the reason for that is that 2.5% steps, like I've indicated now, is just too rough. It's not enough granularity, especially given the massive impact it has on income sustainability, especially for the kind of time horizon we want to aim for. And I'll talk about that just now. Okay, so same red and green as you'll see 5% giving 33 years, 7.5% giving 13 years. And then maybe just to highlight yellow years at 4.5%, even at that level of granularity, even at what feels like a 0.5% different drawdown level, 5% versus 4.5%, the impact is 12 years. So 33 versus 45 years. And again, it's because it's not actually 0.5% difference. If you do the same calcs, like I said, yes, just now, it's 50,000 versus 45,000. And that is in fact a 10% difference. And that's why that impact between 45 years and 33 is so big. Okay, so set the scene a little bit. What do we do now? Because you may look at the table, and that's what I mentioned, that I even struggle to relate with it. Because you may look at the table and think, well, 10 years is fine, isn't it? You know, I'm not going to live longer than 10 years. And how often do we hear that, by the way? And that's a bad thing. But then the answer is, it may actually be okay, but it depends on how old you are. And generally, for the people we tend to deal with are younger. And I mean, not very young, I mean around 65. And for that, 10 years is just not enough. And we'll unpack that a little bit in the next few slides. So the way you have to think about it is actually to bring the probability of survival or life expectancy or name what you want, but bring that into the picture. Or just considering the correct time horizon, and I'll talk about that now, because there is a simple rule of thumb that you can use there. But let's first unpack why. The two graphs I show here are what we call standard mortality curves. Both of them are based on average statistics we see for people at retirement. So in this case, 65-year male on the left-hand side, females on the right-hand side, and looking at their expected mortality and life expectancies. And this is generally for people who were able to save for retirement. So not the entire population. For the entire population, the curves will be a little bit steeper downward sloping, so the life expectancy will be shorter. But generally, we deal with and give advice that you give advice to, and we ensure this whole. And I can just make a side note in that, you know, the mortality experience we've seen to date, having been in the market for 10 years already, is also very, very similar to this. Okay, so what are we looking at? Let's take the males, just because I'll be focusing a few of the stats on them. So on the left-hand side, starting at 100% at the age of 65, you'd expect at the age of 75 that 3/4 of people will still be alive. Let's see if I can maybe there's my laser pointer. Moving down the curve at 82, half of the people, so 2 in 4. Okay, this is also what they call the life expectancy. So maybe a reminder, but then also pointing out life expectancy is the point at which you'd expect 50% of the population to have passed away, that midpoint. What it also means is that you'd expect 50% of the population to live longer than that as well. And that's the trick. Consider when you look at retirement income. You cannot only plan up to life expectancy, even though that's already slightly longer than people think they're going to live on average. We've shown that in quite a few of our Just Retirement Insight surveys over the years. People tend to underestimate how long they're going to live. So already they get this 82 for males aged 65 wrong. And they forget that then there's a 50% chance of living longer than that. And cutting through all of that, I believe that's why, to a large extent, we have a crisis at the moment. People have been underestimating that. Moving further down the curve, a quarter, so that yellow block at age 89, and then 1 in 10, so 10% alive at age 95. That is why best advice is to look at that time horizon. For males, a 30-year time horizon from 65 to 95. For females, similar curve, but that point is actually at age 100. And that is why best advice is for females retiring to consider a time horizon up to the age of 100. The other useful thing about this rule of thumb is actually the older you get, this curve moves to the right, as you can imagine. However, that 10% point remains fairly age 95 and age 100 for males and females respectively. Up to, of course, up to the point that they reach maybe 9500. But generally speaking, that's an easier thumb to use than trying to remember how the life expectancy extends over time. Because you can imagine that a 65-year-old getting to with a 50% chance at that age. So if he is still alive then, life expectancy isn't 0, it is now extended onward. And that's why the 95 and the 100 are good rules. Okay, so how do we think then about this in relation to drawdown rates? What we've simply done is mapped, we'll see these vertical lines, the same 75% point, 10 years, percent at 17, 5 at 24 years, and 10% probability at 30 years. So points on the curve that I showed just now. And now already you can use this to say, well, what are safe drawdowns, or what kind of drawdown rates should I be looking at? First thing to say is anything above 8.5%, so those chevron colored bars, is not good for a 65-year-old. And that's because, by definition, for at least 75% of those people, you'd expect their income strategy to, etc. I'm not going to go into the detail here, but maybe to show that 50 then, so those draw down 7 to 8%. For 25% failure rate, 6 and 6.5%. Still above 10% at 5.5%, but then when you get to 5% and lower, the probability of success high enough to start saying, well, this is a safe drawdown strategy. Okay, and that is our extended rule of thumb. Use the CISA table, look up at the 10% column, then aim for age 9 males or age 100 for females. But don't just there are also other ways in which you can look at this. And one useful other way, which doesn't do exactly the same thing, is to look at a table that the FSCA created. Maybe say, I am happy to try and keep an eye on questions as we go along. If it feels like, or if it seems like it's best to deal with it on that slide, I'll deal with it, but also happy to, of course, take the questions at the end. Okay, I see John has questions. I think I'll get back to that later if that's okay, but please do send questions through. Also happy to take, if that's an option, happy to take verbals or spoken questions at the end. Okay, so FSCA table, I'll just move the chat box so I can try and see everyone. So, and the CISA working determine drawdown percentages, which they deem to be safe. And they've gone about this very sophisticatedly. They use stochastic simulations, Monte Carlo framework. We were actually able to mimic those with information they provided. And then it gets quite complex, but they actually look at a double failure test. They look both at life expectancy and at this 10% mortality or probability of survival point. And then they derive that table there at the bottom. And you can see, as you'd expect, two things. That the older you are, the higher you can draw down safely. That's A, and B, that generally it's higher for males than females, roughly 0.5 to 1% difference. And that's simply because females are expected to live longer than men. Okay, so back to basic rule, between 4% and 8%, you'll see that's the range of that table, is deemed to be safe. And it then varies a bit by sex, but then also the age you're at. So back to these rules of thumbs, you can either then use one of these two methods. The one is use the CISA table that we all know quite well, map it to 95 or 100, or just use the FSCA table. But there's more to this. Quick reminder of the risks in retirement: longevity, investment, inflation, and capital risk. And these are all mitigated in life annuities. But we also know that they're good products, but they do offer flexibility. A pure living annuity offers great flexibility, but as we've shown now, there is a risk of running out of money. The question then becomes, well, given this, what should I be looking at? And to think through this, we have gone, well, let's look at safe drawdown rates, and that's these two columns on the right-hand side. So sustainable drawdown rates between 4 and 8%. And then what we call life annuity rate. So what kind of income rate can you get from going fully into a guaranteed life annuity? Okay, and I'll talk a bit about the annuity rates later because there's a current good window of opportunity. with these in mind, we said, well, let's go and create what we've now called an income sustainability map. The footnote there was that we used to call them scatter plots, but that wasn't a very good. In fact, the scatter plot is any kind of XY scatter. We've changed it to income sustainability map, and this map simply shows the distribution of living annuitants or a single person by age. So age, horizontal line, and then draw down vertical coordinates. And maps provides you a visual picture of where these living annuitants lie. Now, to then say, well, is that bad? We overlaid two lines over this map. The one that blue at the bottom, see, I've labeled it FSCA just to keep it short, but it's those safe drawdown rates, that 4 to 8% that I mentioned just now. Next line I added was what I referred to on the previous slide, and that's those annuity rates. So the rate of income you can get from going wholly or fully into a guaranteed life annuity. Now that's another useful line in the sand, if you want, because that tells you what essentially the maximum possible income rate is. Because by definition, annuities are born and bred to create and give you the best income possible. And maybe a quick side note here, those rates are simply higher because as an insurer, you can then price on the average. You can price on that age 82 life receipt. You don't have to price for that age 95 or 100 because the billing mechanism takes care of the rest. As you know, there's cross-subsidization between those who live longer is subsidized by those who happen to die before life expectancy. And that's how that pooling mechanism works and why annuity rates are so much higher than safe drawdown rates. And is what we then use to determine these zones. 2 lines, which gives you 3 zones. Oops, one click too much. And those are the 3 zones that I mentioned. So right at the top, danger zone, simply those drawing down at rates above that coral annuity. And here, as I mentioned, a life annuity can eliminate the risk of running out of money. At the bottom, the safe zone. If you haven't noticed, I have a safe zone jersey on today. That's for a pure living annuity, which offers flexibility, but your money could run out. But at those levels of drawdown, there's a good enough chance that it won't happen. So a pure living annuity is a good investment. And then in the middle, this risky zone here, where a blended annuity vastly improves the income sustainability picture without reducing drawdown. And that's maybe already good news number 1 for today. Being in the risky zone is not a problem, but it's advisable to blend, i.e., partially annuitize or put part of the funds into a life annuity, because the combination of the two then gives a sustainable overall strategy. So what is the state of our retired nation then? And this is the crisis we're in, which is probably underplayed in the news, and we hope to fix it before there are some bad press about this. We have been doing these income sustainability maps in the background since 2019. How we do it practically, by the way, is we only need anonymized data. We don't need to know who exactly the people are, but we do need to know what their sex and date of birth is and how much they're drawing down. That allowed us to map these lives. And it then looks something like this. Actually, I don't even think there are 20,000 dots here. And by the way, I think we're beyond 30,000 by now already. But it showed us how many people or living annuitants were in these various zones. And what we found is on screen, and that's a bit worrisome. For this large sample of lives, 68% of living Newtons, so 2/3, are already drawing down at unsustainable rates. Average drawdown is 8.5, whereas the average safe drawdown, using the table or that rule of thumb that I mentioned, is 5.3%. Essentially would mean an income shortfall of more than 50 years for this group as a whole. Okay, and now for a little bit of fun, how you can think about it if you compare this to what you would responsibly do in rugby. Okay, so quick reminder of the retirement zones we covered. Right at the top, the danger zone. Clients are drawing down more than the life annuity rate. There's a high probability that they'll run out of money. However, those who fall in the zone can fully annuitize, and that will give them a guaranteed income for the rest of their lives. Possibly, if you're far from that line, you may also annuitize and reduce your expense. But there is hope. Then risky zone. This is where people are drawing down between the safe drawdown rate and this maximum possible life rate, where there are potentially unsustainable drawdown strategies. Blending, as I mentioned, so blending a living and a life annuity can provide a drawdown strategy which is acceptable, because that life annuity components provide a safety net, and it reduces the net drawdown rate from the rest of the assets. So it gives you that income kicker to allow you to draw down less on the rest. And then finally, that green safe zone. And here a client is drawing down less than the sustainable drawdown rate, and therefore sustainable drawdown strategy. Here a pure living is great. There's still a risk of running out of money there. Especially with current annuity rates, you could argue there's opportunity there to partially annuitize, just get a superior return. Okay, so back to our rugby field, where you have the same kind of zones: the zone, risky zone, and danger zone. So that risky zone is where the ball can go either way. The safe zone is where the scoring zone is, can take more risk. And the danger zone is where you require your defense. So taking a page out of playbook, and I think he's missing one because there was one about retirement right in the back. And isn't that an interesting turn of events that he will remain our coach or become our coach again, as if he ever was gone. Looking at the rugby field, it can be split into those three zones. So just visually at the top, zone closest to our try line is clearly that danger zone. Zone between our 22 and their 22 is that risky zone in the middle. And then finally that zone right near their try line, which is for us the safe zone where we can go crazy. And what is that playbook then for these different zones? So the one is in the danger zone to pick conservatively and exit safely. In the risky zone to blend forward. And then in the safe zone to play aggressively, like no look kicks as in the World Cup. And here, now for an interlude, just to make sure everyone's awake, we'll play a little bit of something for you.
No All Black was harmed in the making of this. That's a lie. they hit when we drop it. Boca, can it see no all black.
Okay, so as you can see, we were having fun on the side. And before we continue, we thought let's just announce then the starting team that we would pick for a retirement World Cup. Firstly, in the safe zone, in safe zone green, we have a pure living annuity, kitted in that hyperjade, or as we would call seafoam, which offers a great combination of flexibility and choice, perfect for the safe zone. Then in the danger zone, where we have a life annuity, kitted in danger zone coral, it offers a secure income for life, perfect for the danger zone. And that's our lineup so far. And then finally, in the risky zone, a blended living annuity, kitted in risky zone orange, offers the perfect balance of flexibility and security, the best of both worlds, perfect for that risky zone. And there we have it, our team that we'd recommend for the Retirement World Cup. Stronger together. So what is this window of opportunity? What is the hope that I was talking about earlier? The first thing is that, maybe as a quick reminder, what I mentioned, annuity rates. So higher annuity rates at higher ages, which may cause you to want to defer. We can maybe have a discussion around why that's not the case. But the bottom line is that those rates increase with age. They have also been increasing over time. So if you look at where they were in the beginning of 2018 versus where they are now, they are 85% higher than 3 years ago. Why? And that's purely driven by high bond yields. We are able to invest in, and we put a guarantee wrapper around it, essentially. So what does that mean? Well, it simply means that looking at our zones again, this is what, just an impression of what the map in 2018. So larger danger zone, and you can see that red dashed annuity rates there. Now, over time, because those annuity rates went up, it basically means that we now have a smaller danger zone than we had before. Differently put, a bigger risk zone. But remember, as I mentioned, the risky zone has hope. That is where a blended approach can give you a sustainable income approach without having to reduce your drawdown rate. And that's really this window of opportunity we have right now. The higher annuity rates, meaning more people qualify for blending rather than having to fully annuitize. I guess there's another piece of hope. I mentioned that in that danger zone, there are people who fall above the annuity rates, and they would maybe have to take out a full life annuity and reduce their expenses or income. The higher rates at the moment mean more people are able to convert annuity without having to make those changes. And that's maybe that other part, that other silver lining to this dark cloud that we've seen. But there's more. In fact, for today, Richard asked that I include this slide, and this is about other ways in which you can manage your portfolio. And this is particularly interesting when you're talking blending. Remember, blending is around having a portion in the life annuity, but invest in a liquid or in your normal investment portfolios. And the question is how to responsibly invest those. And for that, Your Life has been putting together an investment portfolio. And this is an example just of what that could have. So here, this is back-tested results, which shows for the period, and you can see there from April 2006, so 31 March to be exact, up until this year, and it's actually 19 September to be precise, for a start value of R1 million and drawing down at 6%. So a relatively high drawdown rate. Remember what I mentioned. The end value, and then increasing those drawdowns with 6%. So let's say by and large, keeping up with inflation. As you can see, end value for the Your Life capital graph in blue there, that's at 1.33 million, whereas using standard CISA mean values for the high equity average, a much lower value at 437,000. And that's simply because, as you know, you've heard of the sequence of risk or volatility, which is especially painful or hurtful when you decumulate. So it shows, the graph shows the impact that the correct portfolio structuring can have on capital, and the capital part within our living community. Same annual return assumptions, just a different portfolio structure. So here in this case, the Your Life portfolio has creative hedges and it smooths out the monthly returns, thereby improving that capital retention so much. If you have questions about this, I'd say chat to Richard or Jono. Cool, and then finally, in conclusion then, the optimal retirement income strategy depends on the zone you are in. We spoke about the safe zone, and here the basic strategy is draw down safely. Maybe added to that what I mentioned just now, think about the portfolio construction of the remainder of the rest. In the risky zone, blending, and here that approach, the best of both worlds. So the life annuity giving you a secure for a part, and then the liquid portion or the remainder giving you that flexibility, request potential. And then finally, in the danger zone, in that coral area where it makes sense to annuitize, with the two good news overlays today, the one is that the risky zone is bigger at the moment because of those high life annuity rates. And the other thing in the danger zone, as I mentioned, you can secure a higher income at the moment as opposed to 3 years ago. Or it means at least that those who were a bit in trouble don't have to reduce their expenses or cost of living. Finally, as I mentioned, or as you know, the topic for today is based on our white paper. It's called the Optimal Retirement Income Strategies. Give us some insights into the key drivers of making that optimal decision. We know it's more a theoretical piece, and that in practice you deal with clients that may have needs around that. But this gives you some guiding light, some map of what to do at a level from which you can then take it to a client or a couple's specific circumstances. If you want to read, follow this link. It's on the page here, or if you even so where are we there? There's the link in green, or you can actually just take your phone, switch on your camera, follow the QR code, it takes it to a page. Just put in your email address and we'll send it across to you. Okay, great. And that's the slides that I prepared. I'm happy to take questions, and I did see that questions, so we get back to that. Okay, so maybe also just gonna keep my eye on time and chats. And if someone can just check, someone raise their hand, like happy to take verbal questions too. Question number one, Jonna, Bjorn, is there any data or thinking around how those mortality curves will shift over as medical and genetic technologies advance? And then how will this affect retirement planning in the future? Okay, so let's talk about that. The first thing, to be very precise, actually, those curves I showed already has a level of mortality improvement taken into account. It does shift over time. It actually shift massively from year to year. But no, there's been some good marketing of people already born who will live to 200. I thoughts about that, but no one knows, to be fair. But I can say that generally these statistics do move over time, but not that massively. The key point, I guess, is to keep an eye on things like this. And I'm sure we'll redo a white paper in a few years' time when things have shifted out materially. And then, yes, maybe we'll start saying that for males, you have to plan to 100 and for females to 105 or something like that. But for life expectancies or those curves to shift by 5 years, at this rate will take more than 5 years. Interestingly, though, if I can share a little bit, COVID, if anything, had some short-term mortality effects, of course. But it does interestingly mean that the remainder, so the people who remain technically, has a longer life expectancy. But again, that's not such a material shift that things have been updated massively. I did, on that point, just yesterday, I was in another session where someone mentioned that for the last 30 years, they've heard that if you save 10 times your annual salary for retirement, that's sufficient. Now, that may be, I'll say why just now, but probably rules or say things being said like that, if it's been said 30 years, it sounds like that probably be updated now. And let's talk a little bit about that very quickly. I mentioned safe drawdown rates. So remember, starting at 4%. So one rule of thumb, speaking of rules of thumb, is that pure living annuity at age 65, you can draw down 4%. Means is that you should have saved 25 times, just turning that around, 25 times the income you want to draw down from a living annuity, you must have saved by the time you retire. It's quite a big multiple. Some people are, but not everyone. And then maybe finally, just to say that, but remember, life annuity rates are higher. So if you're not there yet, that's not the end. You do have choices, not to mention, of course, that you can longer to save more, which then also takes up the safe drawdown rate as your life expectancy reduces, thereby giving you more income potential and need to have saved lower multiple of your salary. Okay, cool. Any other questions? Richard, can you see any hands up or anything like that?
I think we're good, Bjorn. Any other questions, guys, before we sign off? Raise your hand.
There's a couple of questions in the Q&A block, one from Vanessa, one from Janine.
Okay, see those actually. So not in the I can see here. Oh, in the Q&A. No, okay, gotcha. Vanessa, thank you. On your mortality slide, at the age where 1 in 4 men are expected to be alive, women are quite a bit younger, if I remember correctly. Would this lead you to encouraging clients to look towards versus single planning, or is it to look at individual planning, in your opinion? So the first response is definitely look at the couple, consider the strategy that makes sense for both. We unfortunately see too many cases where that wasn't properly considered. And especially we have a saying, those vulnerable that we see. And reality is this, that again, typically what we see is a couple where the male is on average 4 years older. So already, just purely because of his age, he's expected to die sooner. And on top of that, he's male, which means his life expectancy is shorter. The ladies are blessed in that regard. They live longer than we do. on average. And that just means, yes, please take the spouse, especially the female spouse, into account. Okay, now that's the basic saying. What the precise plan is then depends a little bit on what the circumstances are. Joint life annuity rates are lower, of course, because it takes, well, first is just some lives that are insured, and there's a chance that they live longer on average. And then especially having a younger female who's also then expected to live longer does put a, let's call it a drag on that income rate. But do consider that. But maybe also keep in mind, if you're in that risky zone, you don't necessarily have to take out the joint life annuity. And the reason for that is that you're not fully annuitized. So let's say you're only annuitizing 25%. I'd actually go for a single life annuity, which gives you a very good kicker. So try and maximize the income rate, thereby relieving pressure off the rest. And at least, 25% is still within good portion. So if the bad luck scenario happens, main dies, the remainder is still available to the spouse. So maybe a longer answer to the question, but very good question and definitely worthwhile considering. Okay, and Janine, no, the bonds are still going to be safe in South Africa in 10 years' time. So I don't know precisely, but I can say that we guarantee that. That's the risk that we take. Why I say that, going into a bit of product detail, but certainly in our escalation annuities, we contractually guarantee that we're going to pay a certain income with certain increases. Yes, we go and invest in bonds, which gives us a very nice high starting yield at the moment, but that wrapper is guaranteed by us. Not to mention then that in our case, as a reminder, Just South Africa is a wholly owned subsidiary of Just in the UK, so there's a very strong balance sheet backing behind us. But a good question. I must say, I wonder as an individual investor if I would go straight into government bonds, but when going into life annuity, know that the life annuity provider or that license holder essentially stands behind that guarantee. Cool. I'm going to click on answer live and see if that takes it away. Cool. Okay. Awesome. I don't see any other questions. John and Rich, just checking if I missed anything.
I think we're good, Bjorn. I can't see any other questions, guys. Any before we sign out? Obviously, you're welcome to give us a call personally, or if you need to ask something offline, no problem. But Bjorn, thanks so much for your time. Thanks for your insights, and guys, I really encourage you to read the white paper. If you don't download it, we will be sent out in any case. But I think it's a really important component of any financial plan to understand this decumulation. And once again, Bjorn, thanks for your insight. Much appreciated.
Anytime. I had lots of fun today. You probably heard how passionate we are. And as Rich said, you can contact any of us, Jono or Rich, and Yaku and Jaka also online, or myself. We're always happy to try to help you, even if it means Just is not directly involved. But we're so passionate about sorting out retirees' income. Cool. Thanks, everyone. Hopefully that gives you a bit of time to make coffee and gear up for the next World Cup. Wait, no, that's 4 years from now. But good luck for that, and we'll chat again.
Cool, Bjorn. Thanks so much. Thanks, guys.
Well, thank you. Bye bye.
Bye bye.